to the pregnant. Hello, and welcome to the Pregnant and Parenting Worker and Students Legal Issues and Rights presentation by the Southwest Women's Law Center. The Southwest Women's Law Center provides legal information for cases and legal issues occurring within the state of New Mexico. Please remember that legal problems can be quite varied and complex. All information contained in this video is for general information purposes only. For individual case or legal issues, do not rely on this information as a substitute for legal advice from a qualified attorney. If you do need legal advice, please feel free to reach out to the Southwest Women's Law Center. Our contact information is located at the end of this presentation. The Southwest Women's Law Center is a nonprofit legal organization founded in 2005. The center is based in Albuquerque, New Mexico, but serves the entire state. The center's mission is to lift up women and their families out of poverty, ensure access to comprehensive reproductive health services and information, and create opportunities for women and girls to realize their full economic and personal potential by eliminating gender bias, discrimination, and harassment. The center integrates 5 tools to create a social change. This is legal research, policy analysis, advocacy, community, and stakeholder education, as well as coalition work on the local, state, and national level. The center's constituency is primarily made up of Latinx, white, and Native American women and girls. My name is Jessica Serrano, and I am the staff attorney for the Southwest Women's Law Center. So what are we doing today? Well, today we're going to be going over your rights as a pregnant, or maybe you're looking to become pregnant, and maybe you're also a worker or a student. So we're going to start off this presentation by going over beginning to end. You find out that you're pregnant all the way through what kind of accommodations you can get, maternity leave or parental leave, breastfeeding, and returning back to work. All of the rights and accommodations that you are entitled to in the state of New Mexico. So, congratulations, you're pregnant. Under current federal laws, if you're a student, you are protected under Title IX. If you're a worker, you are covered under the federal worker protections such as Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, Section 7 of the Fair Labor Standards Act, or FLSA, and also some protections under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Title IX says that schools that receive federal funding cannot discriminate based on sex. To know whether or not your school is receiving federal funding, all you really need to know is whether or not they receive like a Pell Grant, a Perkins Loans, Stafford's Loans, or if anybody at your school receives some sort of federal financial aid. Then they're going to be bound by Title IX. So while pregnancy is not explicitly included in the language of Title IX, the Department of Education has interpreted it to include pregnancy and all related conditions. For example, breastfeeding is a condition related to pregnancy, and so the school must find a way to help a student who needs to breastfeed. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Some interesting history about that. So shortly after the assassination of John F. Kennedy, Title VII was passed as a kind of legacy to Kennedy. So it's a little bit of history for trivia night the next time this ever comes up on trivia night. Initially, Title VII prohibited only sex, race, color, national origin, and religion. But an amendment was added in 1978 to include pregnancy discrimination. Title VII generally applies to employers in the private and public sectors with 15 or more employees, including the federal, state, and local governments. Section 7 of the FLSA says, in short, that you have to provide reasonable break times for employees to express milk if they are nursing, and nursing within a year after they've given birth. And then that place that they are pumping has to be a place other than a bathroom. So no more pumping in the bathroom. It needs to be a place other than a bathroom. It needs to be shielded from view of, other coworkers, or shielded from intrusion of other coworkers as well. And this so this applies to employers with, more than 50 employees. For employers with less than 50 employees, they're not subject to the requirements of this subsection if it would impose an undue hardship to the employer and cause significant difficulty or expense. So what we're looking at here is if they were to need the company or the business would need to put in a lot of money in order to build an extra space for you to be able to pump if they had less than 50 employees. The Americans with Disabilities Act is another federal protection. So pregnancy itself, it's not a disability, but if you're a pregnant worker, you may have impairments related to your pregnancy that qualifies you for disabilities under the ADA. Amendments to the ADA in 2008 made it much easier than it used to be to show the impairments and disabilities from pregnancy. So, a number of pregnancy related impairments are likely to be disabilities even though they are temporary. This includes carpal tunnel syndrome, gestational diabetes, pregnancy related sciatica, and preeclampsia. An employer may not discriminate against an individual whose pregnancy related impairment is a disability under the ADA and must provide an individual with a reasonable accommodation unless the accommodation would result in a significant difficulty or expense. In addition to those federal laws, we have some state laws that protect pregnant students and pregnant workers. These include the New Mexico Human Rights Act, the New Mexico School Excused Absences for Pregnancy Act, which we will talk about later in the presentation, and the Pregnant Workers Accommodation Act. So the New Mexico Human Rights Act is the equivalent of Title VII, but it has an expanded list to include more types of discrimination like pregnancy, childbirth, and conditions related to pregnancy and childbirth. So pregnancy is treated more like a temporary disability for employment-related purposes in companies with 4 or more employees here in New Mexico. So this includes leave and other benefits, um, like to be reasonable accommodations. Unreasonable accommodations include requests for like a stool, extra bathroom breaks, or time to make your prenatal visits. The Pregnant Workers Accommodation Act is actually an amendment to the New Mexico Human Rights Act. So if you read the New Mexico Human Rights Act as it is today, you'll already see these things in there. And so in case you were ever wondering if there was an additional law, it's already just incorporated into the Human Rights Act. So employers with 4 or more employees are required to grant the reasonable accommodations, as I mentioned it before. And an employer cannot force a pregnant employee to take unpaid or paid leave if another accommodation can be provided, unless the employee requests leave as the accommodation. Some examples of reasonable accommodations include being allowed to keep water at your workstation, extra bathroom breaks, reprieve from heavy lifting, light duty, and time off to attend your prenatal visits. So, tips for talking about your pregnancy. So, you found out that you're pregnant. When do you tell your employer or your school? Well, there's no real legal deadline to notify your employer until later in your pregnancy, when you will need to request leave 30 days in advance to taking off for childbirth, if you're covered by the Family and Medical Leave Act. Um, when do you tell your school? Once again, there's no real legal deadline for notifying your school. However, you will need to talk to your Title IX coordinator and faculty when you will need to start requesting accommodations or absences under Title IX. If you need to take off for pregnancy related illnesses or you need accommodations for your pregnancy, like you need accommodations to make those prenatal visits, you're going to have to talk to your employer or school sooner. If you suspect that your boss or school faculty won't be happy to hear that you are pregnant, do not feel pressure to tell them before you're ready. But do keep in mind that colleagues, boss, and your school might appreciate being told as soon as you feel comfortable so that everyone can plan. What to say to your employer? Before starting the conversation, it's a good idea to do your homework and review your employer or school's policies about pregnancy and parental leave. You may also want to consult with your human resources or your Title IX coordinator. Unfortunately, you may need to reassure your boss that you are committed to your job and that you plan to return back to work. Unfortunately, we still live in times where bosses still don't understand that you can be a parent and work. Um, I wonder in an age of COVID if people are finally getting the idea that, we're multifaceted people. We can work and we have families and we have other obligations outside of ourselves. And work isn't the only thing in our lives and the most important thing. But if you have a boss that still believes those kind of older ideas about work, um, you may need to, unfortunately, reassure them of your dedication and reliability. And it's important to tackle those assumptions up front. You do not need a doctor's note to announce your pregnancy. And in fact, sometimes a note can cause trouble if your boss thinks that it will limit what you can do on the job. If you're working, you may need to highlight that you're the breadwinner or primary earner in your family and that your household depends on your paycheck. If you have access to parental leave, come armed with a plan to help your boss prepare for your absence and cover your workload while you're gone. Listen carefully and take careful notes after your conversation, especially about anything that sounds strange or wrong to you. Wrong as in like incorrect, and also wrong as in like that just sounded wrong. Unfair treatment based on pregnancy is illegal. And depending on your situation, you may have a right to workplace changes to accommodate your pregnancy. Always follow up your conversations with an email, is another thing that I recommend. Just thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I just want to make sure that, I understand correctly what the plan is going forward and get it down in writing. It's always important to have those things in writing for a lot of reasons. So, pregnancy accommodations. This can sometimes feel like an awkward time when you're pregnant to be asking for accommodations because, on one hand, you might feel like, I can do my job, but on the other, you're going, oh my gosh, I can barely touch my toes in the morning. How am I supposed to be able to like lift this box at work over and over again? So, under New Mexico, just know that you are entitled to accommodations while you are pregnant. Just, and there is a reason for it. Under the New Mexico Pregnant Workers Accommodation Act, if you work for an employer with four or more employees, you have a right to reasonable accommodations for your needs arising from pregnancy, childbirth, or a related condition, so long as providing an accommodation would not impose an undue hardship on your employer. Um, Common accommodations are actually modification of the work environment, acquisition of equipment for sitting, that's like that stool or that chair for you to be able to sit, frequent or longer breaks, the ability to periodically eat or drink water, periodic rest, time off for medical appointments, assistance with lifting or other manual labor, modified work duties or job responsibilities, modified work schedules, and other accommodations that would address your pregnancy or childbirth related needs. Have a conversation with your medical provider about your job duties to understand if you may need changes at work because of your pregnancy related needs. And keep in mind that your needs may change over the course of your pregnancy. Asking for an accommodation from your boss may be uncomfortable depending on your relationship with your boss. Um, Share with your boss that you have a need arising from pregnancy or childbirth if you need this accommodation. To receive the accommodation, you should explain what your pregnancy limitation is, such as like, I can't lift more than 50 pounds. I can't stand for more than 4 hours without taking a break. I must drink water regularly. And then come prepared with a plan. What kind of change do you need and how can you make that work? If you need help with like doing that duty, talk with coworkers and see if they could help you, or talk with coworkers about their ideas about a plan. For accommodation ideas that match your needs, I have a handy dandy hyperlink here that gives you a list of just ideas for workable accommodations. Specify for your boss what kind of accommodations that you need, including any job duties that you need modified. And make sure your boss knows that you can still perform the bulk of your duties, and refer them to the job accommodation network if they have any questions, which is that second hyperlink on the screen. The next thing that you can do is explain how your requested accommodation will not be difficult or expensive, because we don't want to get into that undue hardship territory. We want to explain off the bat, this is not going to be difficult. This is not going to be expensive. If your boss requires a note from your doctor to confirm your need, make sure that the doctor's note is as specific as possible and outlines exactly what you can do. Avoid vague terms. Like, if you can't lift more than 50 pounds, saying something like, do not do heavy lifting. Heavy is such a vague term. What could be heavy for one person could be light for another. And it could mean that to your boss that you can't do your job. Um, so some employers use doctor's notes to say that a pregnant woman just can't do their job, and they use it as a way to push people out of the workplace, like forcing them to take leave before they're ready or by trying to fire them. So if you need help with writing an effective work accommodation, or you already kind of know, like, hey, it hurts whenever I do this, and I think that I might need an accommodation for that, talk to your doctor. And this link right here will help you write that very specific note with your doctor about what you can do at your job and what you can't. Once again, make sure you get any conversation with your employer documented in writing, that email follow up, um, and then just keep it for your records. You never know if it will come in handy later on. So you've done all of these things for your employer. What does your employer, you know, do for you in this situation? Well, when you ask for your accommodation, it needs to be a two-way conversation. Your employer must engage with you. If they ask for additional information to understand your limitation, you should provide it. And if you have questions about whether a request is permissible, you know, they should be having this conversation with you. Your employer may not discriminate or retaliate against you due to your pregnancy, um, just because you're requesting an accommodation. If you have any questions about, like, I think that this is an accommodation that I would like to have, but I don't know if this would create an undue burden, reach out to an attorney first. If you're thinking it might be getting into that undue burden space, reach out to an attorney, and then you can have that conversation with your boss with a little more confidence. But just know that you're not entitled to receive your first choice of accommodation, but your boss cannot send you out on leave that's paid or unpaid if you did not request that as your accommodation. And your employer also needs to be posting all of these rights up in like workspaces or break rooms, and they're all available through the New Mexico Human Rights Bureau. So we've been talking about work accommodations. What about school? So before starting a conversation with your school, it's a good idea to do your homework and review your school's policies about pregnancy and parental leave. You may also want to consult with your human resources or school counselor or your Title IX coordinator. If your delivery date coincides with an exam period, you can have a discussion with your faculty and school counselor or Title IX coordinator about different accommodations for testing periods. Listen carefully and take careful notes about your conversation, especially anything that sounds strange to you. Unfair treatment based on pregnancy is illegal, and depending on your situation, you may have a right to changes based on your pregnancy. Excused absences during pregnancy and childbirth is allowed for as long as your doctor says it's necessary. Your school must allow you to return to the same place um, academically and to the same extracurricular status as before your medical leave began, and should give you the opportunity to make up any missed work while you are out. Teachers should understand the Title IX requirements related to excused absences and medical leave. And your teacher may not refuse to allow you to submit work after a deadline if you missed it because of pregnancy or childbirth. If your teacher's grading is based on class participation or attendance and you missed that because of pregnancy or childbirth, you should be allowed to make up those participation and attendance credits that you didn't have a chance to earn. Pregnant students may be provided the same special services it provides other students with temporary medical conditions. This includes homebound instruction, at-home tutoring, and independent study. All right, we did it. We got all the way through announcing pregnancy, requesting accommodations. Now we're welcoming baby. Employees postpartum leave. How long is maternity leave? I think this is the number one question that gets asked. So most companies allow you to use your sick vacation, and holiday time towards your maternity leave. Some companies require that you take these benefits first before using any disability or unpaid time. And it's important to check with your human resources department to confirm the policies related to using your sick vacation and holiday time in relation to your maternity leave. Also, question any restrictions on how it is used with your disability and unpaid leave time. So, family and medical leave is a law that requires most companies to allow their employees up to 12 weeks of unpaid family leave time after the birth of their child. FMLA applies to both men and women and is available to those that adopt a child. If the parents work for the same company, the 12 weeks is divided but between the two of them, and they take the division, they can divide the time however they want to. For example, both parents could take 6 weeks off, one could take 4 weeks off, while the other takes 8 weeks off. But there are exceptions to FMLA. These exceptions include the size of the company, which, if you're a company with less than 50 employees, you do not have to provide FMLA. If you've been working for the company for less than 12 months, you may not qualify for FMLA. And if you are one of the top 10% earners in the company, you may not qualify for FMLA. For employees in New Mexico that do not work for the state or work for a company with less than 50 employees, there is no state mandated maternity leave. You will have to look for your company policies and restrictions on using your vacation, sick, and unpaid leave time together. You'll also need to check with your boss about any concerns related to your time away. Inquire about what happens to your benefits while you are on leave and whether or not anything changes, and who will pay your premiums while you are out on leave. For students, all New Mexico's school districts provide parents with 10 days off after the birth of a child and another 4 days for baby's doctor's appointments or to care for a sick child. That's on top of the 10 permitted days of unexcused absences for all students. For all other students, you will need to check with your student handbook and with your faculty and Title IX coordinator to find accommodations and work on a leave plan. So what about breastfeeding? These right here are just going to be some facts and figures around breastfeeding. We believe that fed is best, and it is feeding your child that is the most important thing. It doesn't matter how. But if you were ever wondering anything about breastfeeding, I'm going to go over some facts and figures about the benefits. Infants who are breastfed have reduced risks of asthma, obesity, type 1 diabetes, lower, have reduced risks of severe lower respiratory disease, ear infections, SIDS, diarrhea, and vomiting. So there's all of these things are reduced through breastfeeding. Breastfeeding also helps mother by lowering your risk of blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, ovarian cancer, and breast cancer. 83% of parents in New Mexico that start off breastfeeding their infants, like that's 83% off the bat. That's a pretty great number. But at 6 months, that number drops to 57.9%. And at the 12-month mark, we're at 40% of parents that are breastfeeding. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that infants be exclusively breastfed for the first 6 months and continue breastfeeding along with introducing appropriate complementary foods for 1 year or longer. Breastfeeding is no longer beneficial after 12 months, or 24 months, not 12 months, 24 months. So if breastfeeding can go up to 24 months, and we're seeing Like half of the people that started breastfeeding at the beginning drop off at 12 months. Why are people stopping breastfeeding so early? Well, 60% of mothers do not breastfeed for as long as they intend to. This is influenced by issues with lactation or latching, concerns about infant nutrition and weight, mothers' concerns about taking medication while breastfeeding, unsupportive work policies or a lack of parental leave, cultural norms and a lack of family support, and unsupportive hospital practices and policies. Studies have found that student mothers who have had previously disengaged from school find a new reason to return to school after the birth of a child. And a breastfeeding mother needs to be excused from class temporarily in order to breastfeed or express milk. It's not because of disengagement from the curriculum, it's because of a need to feed baby, but they're still super engaged with school. Breastfeeding is also really good for businesses. A working parent is a major force in the economy, and balancing work and family is an important priority for a lot of people. Breastfeeding employees need flexible break times and clean private spaces to express their milk during the workday. Employers supporting lactation experiences see a reduced staff turnover, reduced sick time, lower insurance and healthcare costs, higher job productivity and employee satisfaction and morale, positive perception in the community, and added recruitment incentives to parents. Even the state supports breastfeeding. Look at all these laws right here. There's like four. And that's on top of the Human Rights Act. So these are all the breastfeeding laws. We have breastfeeding, pregnancy, childbirth, and conditions related to breastfeeding, construing through the HRA, that's the Human Rights Act. So we have like protections there. Um, a mother can breastfeed her child in any public or private location where she is otherwise authorized to be. So if she is authorized to be sitting somewhere, she can be breastfeeding there. If she is not allowed into the employees only section, she can't be breastfeeding back there unless it was like, no, 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 it's fine. You can really be here. Then she has permission to be there, you know. And then employers must provide a clean private place that's not a bathroom for employees who are breastfeeding. Um, and employees must be given breaks to express their milk, but they don't have to be paid for that time. But you could see here, like all these state laws that are making it a breastfeeding a priority as well. So breastfeeding is a fundamental right. And if you feel that you are not being supported in any of these or you are being told otherwise by your employer, well, you can start bringing these up with your employer. If you need a lactation room letter, here is a nice sample. Before sending a letter to your employer, consult with your human resources policies and ask other breastfeeding people in your company how they've handled this situation before. You likely can address your need for a lactation plan in a conversation with your boss. However, at some point, your company may need a letter to formalize the request with your supervisor. In that case, you can start with a sample letter. Edit this letter as appropriate to fit your situation and your company's policies, and insert relevant words and phrases wherever you need to. And if you need any help with this, you can always contact the Southwest Women's Law Center or the New Mexico Breastfeeding Task Force with any questions. This is also a sample breastfeeding sign. Over here, we have like the nice breastfeeding sign. It has the blue logo and everything. And then we have like the two sample laws. One of them, I have them kind of put out a little differently. And you can put both on your sign. You can put one on your sign or the other, however you want to do it. This is for you, however you want to put together your sign. If you need a sign for your new lactation room. Just another thing on lactation before we move on. While you are allowed to breastfeed at work, you your employer might not pay you for the time that you're breastfeeding, but you are supposed to have that time to breastfeed, or your employer may not pay you while you're expressing milk, but you are able to express your milk at work. Another thing to keep in mind is that your employer is not obligated to provide you with a freezer if or a refrigerator if there wasn't one already. So it's something to keep in mind um, when you're returning back to work, if you're going to need to bring a cooler or not. So, tips for returning to work or school. So, while you're pregnant, try to find a breastfeeding friendly childcare provider if you are breastfeeding. Discuss breastfeeding plans with your employer, including a gradual return to work schedule. This could be working 3 days a week to start with and having a midday, uh, like taking a Wednesday off or something. Look for times in your current work schedule that could be used for pumping or nursing, attend a breastfeeding support group, and researching breast pumps. In the first several weeks after birth, breastfeed often and on demand. Make sure that breastfeeding is going well before you're giving a pacifier, using a bottle, or starting to pump, unless you are told otherwise by your doctor or the lactation consultant that you're working with. 2 weeks before returning to work, review plans with your baby's caregiver, find a comfortable and effective breast pump, store expressed milk in the freezer and keep as a reserve, establish a nursing and pumping routine, practice giving expressed milk in a bottle once per day so baby gets used to it. Find a bag for pumping supplies, including a cooler bag with ice packs to keep your milk cold if you don't have a freezer or refrigerator available at work. And request an accommodation letter from your provider if needed. 1 week before work, if possible, leave your baby with a caregiver a few hours each day. Get up an hour earlier than you normally would just to practice getting both you and your baby ready for the day. Time your route and to your caregiver and to work, and allow plenty of time for nursing, settling the baby, and saying goodbye. The night before, pack your diaper bag, your pump, water, and snacks for work. The morning of, eat a good breakfast, then get ready. Wake, nurse, and dress your baby. Pack your thawed milk. Make sure it is clearly labeled with the day's date, baby's name, the date it was expressed, and then plan to breastfeed when dropping off and when picking baby up from the child caregiver. And when picking the baby up, bring home any unused breast milk from the caregiver, relabel with the tomorrow's date, and use the next day. For more information, contact your WIC office, La Leche League, a breastfeeding peer counselor, a lactation consultant, or visit the New Mexico Breastfeeding Task Force at the link below. If you need help finding childcare assistance or with paying for childcare assistance, you can use the Child Care Assistance Program, CYFD, through CYFD. The Child Care Assistance Program subsidizes the cost of childcare for low-income families that's at or below 200% of the federal poverty level. Once eligible, families can remain eligible for up to 400% federal poverty level for 1 year. Eligibility is determined by a variety of factors and can include the gross monthly income, family size, age and needs of the child, school or work status, residency, and citizenship. Only the applicant children must be citizens. For more details on the child care assistance or the application process, you can visit the first link. And for more information on the entire program, you can visit the second link. So it's just situations to look out for. So we're getting here towards the end. Uh, look out for work places, look out for school situations where people are not allowed to participate in certain activities because they're pregnant. And I don't mean like, oh, this person wasn't allowed to do tackle football and they were 8 months pregnant. I mean, like, they weren't allowed to do certain things and they were kind of being pushed out of the job or they were being pushed out of school into a substandard program. Look for workers or students not being allowed to express milk or visit their children at daycare. Look for requests or accommodations being denied despite similar accommodations being made for other temporarily disabled people. Work or schools erroneously requiring supporting documentation. Work or school pushout, and then funneling students into alternative and potentially substandard programs. Look out for these situations. And if you see anybody in these situations, talk to them about reaching out if they're a worker, reaching out to the EEOC or the NMHRB. And if they're a student, talk to them about going to an attorney. I'm about to talk to you about what the EEOC and NMHRB are right now. So, filing a complaint as an employee. If you feel that your employer is discriminating against you because you are pregnant or parenting, you may file a complaint. An aggrieved employee cannot go straight to the courts to enforce Title VII. You must first engage in an administrative process through the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission, EEOC, or the New Mexico Human Rights Bureau, NMHRB. Both agencies share information, and you can file with both. You must file within 180 days of the last incident or within 300 days of the complaint if the complaint is also covered by a state or local anti discrimination law, which is if it's pregnancy related, we cover pregnancy related things in the New Mexico Human Rights Act. So, but sooner is always better. Sooner is always better. If you feel that your school is discriminating against you because you are pregnant or parenting, you may also file a complaint. You can use your school's internal Title IX grievance procedure, or you can file something with the U.S. Department of Education Office for Civil Rights, even if you have not filed a complaint with your school. If you file with the Office for Civil Rights, make sure you do so within 180 days of when the discrimination took place. Or you can go straight to court, even if you have not filed a complaint with your school or the Office for Civil Rights. Well, that was it. Thank you so much for staying, and I hope everybody here learned something, and I hope people are never discriminated against and don't have to ever contact the EEOC because your employer just gives you 12 weeks off or more for parental leave and gives you all the accommodations you could ever need. But in the event that that doesn't happen, I hope everybody here knows now what they need to do and what they're entitled to. If you ever have any questions, need any advice, you can always contact the Southwest Women's Law Center. You can hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Probably better to email us, call us, or stop by our office on Quincy Street. Thank you all again, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye bye.